Next, we're looking at Europe and America, 1870 to 1900, and you know you're in trouble when I'm only covering 30 years. You notice things have been accelerating. The Renaissance, couple of hundred years, we're doing multiple chapters over that period. Now we're doing a chapter over 30 years. So things are moving fairly quickly, and we're going to see that in the historical context as well. For example, we're going to see the spread of the Industrial Revolution. Now, we've dealt with that since the 18th century, but as we get into this period, 1870, 1880, you see it's massively spreading across Europe. Now, this map is really a broad generalization, but you get the idea. Now, the Industrial Revolution will only spread into the US about 1860. The Civil War really pushes us into industrialization, so we're going to see that here as well. You're going to see increasing urbanization. Now, we don't need as many people on the farm. There have been agricultural technologies that have allowed people to move into the cities to look for their fortune, as it were. We will also see more jobs in the cities. Of course, that's where most of the manufacturing, most of the factories are going to be. We're going to see the rise of Marxism. Of course, when we have industrialization and we have the development of a true working class, which exists outside of the small urban centers that you might have seen in the Renaissance. You have Florence and Rome and that sort of thing, but they're not that big compared to what we're getting into here at the end of the 19th century. So, with the rise of a larger and larger working class and the rise of urbanization, which allows these ideas to spread, you see the rise of Marxism. We will also see the rise of Darwinism, which takes on multiple forms, such as social Darwinism, which plays a role in imperialism. So these two will play together very, very closely. Darwinism, more specifically social Darwinism, when you apply the ideas of evolution to societies, states that if your country is not currently growing, then it must be dying, which brings us to imperialism, where the great European nations, using Darwinism as one of the bases for why they're going to go out and colonize, will go into another round of imperialization. But here, instead of colonizing primarily the New World, we're going to see colonization primarily in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. And these colonies are going to be massive in some cases. The Congo will be taken over by Belgium. The Congo will be 50 times the size of Belgium itself. And they're not that keen on waffles. So why the Belgians are there, no one's really sure. But basically, they're looking for resources. So these European countries want resources. And we have a lot of resources in Africa that aren't being used all that much. They look at India the same way. They will try and cut up China in a very similar way. We will see some colonies continuing in the Americas, but with the advent of the United States and the Monroe Doctrine, unless the colony already existed, they can't have new colonies. The U.S. will become a world power. This happens because of the Civil War. How does it happen? Well, basically, during the Civil War, the U.S. builds up the largest navy the world has ever seen, the largest standing army the world has ever seen, which we saw alluded to in Winslow Homer's A Veteran in a New Field. And so this becomes a huge issue. The United States is suddenly a major military power with full industrialization. Everyone kind of sees that. And so they become a major world power slowly, but that is where they're headed. When you get to the Spanish-American War, 1898, that's where the U.S. really comes onto the world stage. France will start to stabilize. It has been unstable for quite some time here, really starting around the middle of the 18th century all the way up to about 1870. 1870 is the Franco-Prussian War. Basically, the Germans, who have just unified, decide the best idea is to go ahead and invade France. And it's an amazingly fast war. It's about 6 weeks. Just before they conquer Paris, the French will surrender. And this will actually cause some stabilization. The French people sit there and go, no, this is ridiculous. We've been at war constantly for the last 150 years. We need to slow down. So we will see increasing stability following the Franco-Prussian War. And we see the development of nationalism. Nationalism is this idea that you identify with your nation rather than with your home. So, for example, today, if we were to take you back 200, 300 years, you might identify not as an American, but as someone from Madison or someone from Wisconsin or maybe a Midwesterner. But you don't generally identify by a country. That's just not done. So throughout the end of the 19th century, these countries are going to work hard to get their people to nationalize. And part of the way we do that, at least in the United States, is the development of the Pledge of Allegiance. You start singing the Star-Spangled Banner on a regular basis. All of these ideas that develop a identity which is American as opposed to Wisconsin or Madison or whatever neighborhood you're from. This causes a big problem because what it does is the easiest way to create nationalism is through exceptionalism. Basically, we are better than everyone else, so identify as American. The problem is you start looking down on everyone else, and this will lead to much of the war and instability that we're going to see when we get into the early 20th century. But with all of this in mind, let's turn to the art.